nerds out there in YouTube land. Welcome back to 3MVTA. I am your host, Big Jake, and today we have a little bit of a late spooky video for you. This is a request done by somebody, which I will give a special shout out to at the end of this video. But this is my 10 favorite vampire movies. And before we get into the list, I just want to let you all know that I am not the owner of any of these properties. All these are for review purposes only. They are all owned by their respective owners, and this is my personal opinion on what my favorite vampire movies are. And but before we get into the list, I have a couple honorable mentions here. My honorable mentions are Dracula, 1931, Horror of Dracula, 1958, and then Dracula again, 1979. The first one, Dracula, 1931, starring Bela Lugosi, which would pretty much frame how Dracula was portrayed for all the years to come, pretty much, except for a few movies here and there. Interesting thing about that film is that it was the first horror movie with sound, and the way he would portray Dracula, which became almost like a stereotype of the character, wasn't a conscious decision, which is really funny. Bela Lugosi actually didn't speak any English. The only English he spoke were his movie lines. So the reason he speaks at the pace that he does and the way he does is because of the fact he didn't speak English. So ironically enough, what would have been normally a handicap at the time, trying to be an English-speaking actor without speaking English would frame, a character for pretty much all eternity. You have Horror of Dracula, which was the Hammer, the UK studio Hammer version of Dracula. They actually just called it Dracula in the UK. It was released as Horror of Dracula everywhere else, as far as I know. Starring Christopher Lee as Dracula and Peter Cushing as Van Helsing. They ended up making, I think, 7 Dracula films. Each of them kind of more disappointing than the last one. It actually got to the point where Christopher Lee was really tired of playing Dracula, to the point where he did it almost as if he was forced to do it, kind of thing. And then the last one I have on here is Dracula, released in 1979. It's just a remake of the original film. I mean, there's definitely some differences. Dracula, played by Frank Langella. Donald Pleasence is also in the film, which a lot of you may know him as Dr. Loomis from Halloween. And then Sir Laurence Olivier was Van Helsing. This one was a lot more atmospheric and definitely had a more romantic quality to it. But I wanted to mention all these films because I don't consider them my favorites, but I consider them all very important, and I do like all the films, so I just wanted to make sure to give them a mention in here. But let's go ahead and get on with our list at number 10. Number 10, Dracula, Dead and Loving It. Released in 1995, this is a Mel Brooks film, starring Leslie Nielsen as Dracula. Mel Brooks, of course, is in his own movie as Van Helsing. Harvey Korman's actually in the film too, which is pretty funny. But yeah, it's a Dracula movie done in the spoof style of Mel Brooks, and it's just I always really liked the film. I like how they made it into a comedy as opposed to the usual Dracula style of movies. And while it's not Mel Brooks' best film, it's definitely one worth watching. It's very funny. So give it a look. Tell me what you think. Number 9. Dracula 2000. Now, I might get a little flack for this one, but I thought this was a good movie when it came out. Now, hindsight, it's not. I understand that it's not a great film, and I have this a lot in things that I like. I can acknowledge the fact that they're not good in general while still liking them. I think everybody has something like that, I'm sure. But this was supposed to be like a remake / like revamp of the Dracula story. before this, all the Dracula stuff was pretty much based off of Bram Stoker's novel, or maybe some, lore of, like urban legend type kind of stuff, as far as the character goes. But this one they tried to change it up a little bit. Gerard Butler plays Dracula, and the well, spoiler alert here, the difference in this film is Dracula is actually Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus, and he tried to take his own life to atone for his sins, and as punishment, God transformed him into Dracula, the vampire, the creature of neither the dead or the living. This film definitely had mixed results, as you can see at the ratings. It didn't get very good ratings overall, but I mean, I thought it was a decent film for the time. Once again, in retrospective, it's not a great flick, but I still really like it. And not to mention, for my money, it had one of the best soundtracks ever in a film. So, well, let's go ahead to number 8. Number 8 is Near Dark. Now, released in the late 80s, starring Lance Henriksen, Bill Paxton. This is a vampire flick that's just it has nothing to do with Dracula, but it follows a group of vampires as they basically travel across country, in like just a bloodbath of every time they go somewhere they just leave bodies in their wake. The main plot of the film though is Adrian Pasdar, I think is how you pronounce it. Adrian Pasdar, who plays Caleb. He is attacked by the younger female vampire, and then the whole film is him traveling with them, trying to decide if he wants to join them or not. And so yeah, but good movie, great vampire movie. Check it out and judge for yourselves. Let's move on to number 7. Let Me In, released in 2010. Now, this is a remake of the Swedish film Let the Right One In, which didn't, I think it only came out like 3 years before this one did, something like that. So, while it is a kind of a needless remake, I thought it was really well done. The Chloe Grace Moretz, who would later do other things, like she played Carrie in the third Carrie film. It's like the second or third remake of the film Carrie, and she plays Carrie, but she does a good job either way. Cody Smith McPhee as the main character Owen, who is, if anyone's familiar with the film, he's the kid that gets bullied and then stumbles upon Abby, who is a vampire, and Richard Jenkins plays. They call him the father, but he's also her guardian. It's just this film. I really liked this film, and the reason is it's very well paced. It has kind of like a wholesomeness to it as far as like the friendship between Cody and Abby. But at the same time, it also has like a lot of blood and like crazy vampire stuff in it. So really good balance of certain things, and I think it's definitely worth your time if you're ever interested. Number 6, 30 Days of Night. Released in 2007. This is based off of the Frank Miller graphic novel. The idea being that a group of people, I can't remember the name of a town in Alaska, and there really is parts of Alaska that are like this, but they go to a time of the year where it's night for a month, basically. And a group of vampires stumble upon this town and begin to take it over slowly, one by one, killing off everybody that's left in the town. Because some people apparently don't stay in the town during this time, but some people stay, the whole time. It's a great thriller movie. There's a lot of claustrophobic moments where they're trapped and they don't know what's going on. They don't know how they're going to get out of it. And very well done, very bloody, and just just a good, I mean, all around, just a good all around vampire movie. Um, it's not slow, but the build up to the vampires coming is really good. Ben Foster plays, I call him the Herald, and what I mean by that is the same idea as like Silver Surfer was for Galactus. Like he goes to places and warns them that these people are coming, even though there's nothing they can really do about it. But in the end, um, you know, in the end, it's all the humans that are left, at least, um, do prevail eventually. And but yeah, it's just a good violent vampire movie. So check it out. Number 5, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Now, a lot of you, I'm sure, are thinking like, "What in the world am I thinking?" But for a 90s vampire movie, it's really good. It's part comedy, but it's also like a dark movie at the same time. Um, Christy Swanson plays Buffy. Um, you have Luke Perry as the other as Buffy's boyfriend, who's the other like is like the pseudo one of the pseudo main characters, and you have Donald Sutherland and Rutger Hauer as the other main characters. Donald Sutherland plays Merrick, who is a he's basically like, I wouldn't say he's Van Helsing per se, but he is a vampire hunter who trains other vampire hunters, trying to take down the vampire lord Lothos, played by Rutger Hauer. And you get the idea that I don't know if he's actually immortal or if he just keeps being like reincarnated, but you get the idea that he's been around for centuries training to try to defeat uh, the vampire Lothos itself. So, but good movie, a lot of really good comedic moments. Um, in my opinion, better than the series, because the series just kind of went on forever and a day. So let's move on to number 4. Vampires, aka John Carpenter's Vampires. And yes, technically the title is just called Vampires. Released in 1998, starring James Woods, um, directed by John Carpenter, of course. Um, I always really liked this movie. It definitely has a John Carpenter feel to it. Um, like I say down there at the end, I wouldn't say that it's definitely not his best film, but it is a really good film. And then it adds new things to the mythos that we're not usually familiar with. Like, for example, vampires don't sleep in coffins; they typically bury themselves in the soil, or things like that. And the idea of this movie is James Woods plays a character named Jack Crow, who hunts down and kills vampires for the church. Um, Thomas Ian Griffith plays Jan Valak, who in the film I believe he's supposed to be like the first, like he's like, as far as they know, he's the oldest living vampire. So he can't be killed by regular means. Like, he's exceedingly strong and powerful. Um, just once again, a very very violent, bloodbathy vampire flick, but with some really good character interactions to move the story along. So definitely worth your time. So let's go to number 3, shall we? Number 3, I put the Blade franchise. Released in 98, 2002, and 2004. Um, the Blade trilogy is one of those things that I would say, honestly, the movies got progressively worse after the first one, but the first two are definitely really good films, honestly. The third one isn't bad for what it is. They tried to take a more comedic approach to it, and also try to involve they try to involve their own version of Dracula in it, which isn't a bad idea. I just don't think the third film was executed very well. Um, but the idea being, Blade is, well, it's based off the Marvel character Blade, um, which honestly, um, all these people made a huge deal about Black Panther when apparently everybody forgot that Blade was a black comic book superhero from Marvel who, I mean, Black Panther, I think, predates Blade as far as creation goes and as far as the comic books go, but this movie came out way before Black Panther movie did. And everybody seems to kind of forget that. And as far as I know, I mean, people say, I mean, I've read some things online saying that um, The Meteor Man was the first black superhero movie, but The Meteor Man was not based off a comic. They didn't do a comic until after the release of the movie. Whereas this was based off of the I would say Blade is the first black comic book superhero film, as opposed to just, you know, they just made him a superhero, you know, and it's but Wesley Snipes plays Blade, who is a half human, half vampire. They call him the Day Walker because he's not restricted by the same sensitivity to light as normal vampires are. Chris Christopherson plays his caretaker and trainer and friend, mentor, named Whistler, who's trained him and helps him hunt down these vampires for his own reasons. They never say, I mean, in the comics they probably do, but in the movies they never say who did it, but Whistler's entire family was murdered by a vampire who his father took in. He was a traveler that his father took in, and it turned out he was a vampire and murdered his whole family. Now, in the first movie, honestly, I kind of wish they hadn't done Deacon Frost in the first movie, because that's like Blade's like arch rival. You know, Superman has Lex Luthor, Blade has Deacon Frost. Deacon Frost is the vampire that bit his mother, that turned him into a half vampire, half human. So he spends a lot of his time trying to track down Deacon Frost in general. So to get that out of the way in the first movie, I'm guessing maybe they didn't know they were going to do other films. So it makes me kind of wish that they had waited, or at least extended the Deacon Frost storyline to cover all three films. Like, you know, towards the, you know, maybe have him kill him at the end of the third one instead of at the end of the first one. The second one is about vampires who want Blade to team up with them to take out a new race of vampires who are stronger. They're more like mutant. They're more like mutated versions of vampires. They're stronger. They have less resistance to things that vampires have, but at the same time, they consume a lot more blood than vampires are. Like in the film, they actually refer to them as crack addicts that have to feed every couple hours, whereas a regular vampire may only have to feed like once a week or something like that, is what they say. And in the second film, that's when we start to get some real guest stars, like Ron Perlman's in it, Norman Reedus. Luke Goss is the main villain as Nomak, who is just kind of a bad dude. Like, he really gives Blade a run for his money as far as the fight scene goes. And then in Blade Trinity, like I said, that was the one they tried to do a more comedic approach to it. Some hits and misses. I mean, there were a lot of really funny moments. Ryan Reynolds is in the film, so of course he's Ryan Reynolds playing Ryan Reynolds as Hannibal King. Parker Posey plays Danica Talos, which I always liked Parker Posey. I thought she was a great actress, and she does really good in this film. Dominic Purcell, which you may know him from Prison Break, he plays Drake, aka this is their version of Dracula. The one thing I will say that's really disappointing is the fight scene between him and Blade. It comes down, you would think it would be this epic, like, fight scene, and Dracula, aka Drake, makes it out to be like, you know, two warriors battling it out with swords in the end, you know, on the battlefield. And it's like the fight scene is very short and just not, I really wish they would have amplified it, because it's just, that's what it should have come down to. And then you get this like 2-minute fight scene that's really not that good. So, but in all reality, these movies will always, as a whole, I would say that they're good. But when you start breaking down individual parts, that's when you run into trouble. So I would definitely recommend them. I think they're very well done. They're very well directed, very well acted for the most part. Good music, that kind of thing. So check it out, and let's move on to number 2, which I'm pretty sure you all saw this was going to be on the list. Interview with the Vampire. Naturally, I had to put this one on this list. This is just a great film, loosely based off of the Vampire Chronicles by Anne Rice. The vampire Lestat is like kind of like the main character of those novels. This is just, I mean, for the longest time, I would say that this is what other vampire movies were compared to. I mean, it's very well done, very dark, atmospheric, very has a serious tone throughout the movie. Um, there's also this kind of weird, like, homoerotic thing between Brad Pitt's character and Tom Cruise's character. Um, it doesn't really go anywhere, so I'm not really sure why it was such a big focus. Maybe it was because of the novels, but in a film, when you have a visual representation of what's going on, you kind of need things like that to go somewhere. You can't just be like, oh, well, maybe, like, it's just kind of weird to me. But the idea being, Brad Pitt's character Louis is a man who gets turned into a vampire by choice. Lestat actually bites him and then lets him. What he says is, and I quote, it says, "Let me give you the choice that I never had," which is he just, you can either just choose to die or you can become one of the living dead, and or undead, I should say, and so he chooses to become a vampire and live alongside Lestat. But Louis is still problem with his humanity. He doesn't like the idea of sucking blood and killing people and all that sort of thing. So that leads to a lot of problems between him and Lestat. But to which the whole film is, like I said, is just really well done. And Christian Slater plays the interviewer who's actually interviewing Brad Pitt. And at the very, very end of the film, Tom Cruise comes back and bites him after he asked Brad Pitt's character to bite him and turn into a vampire, and he says no, and he leaves. And then as he's driving home, he gets attacked by Lestat, and the film ends with him telling the reporter Malloy, "Let me give you the choice that I never had." So kind of funny. But if you haven't, if there's anybody out there who likes vampire movies who hasn't seen this yet, I'd be really surprised. But if you haven't seen it, you need to watch it. Great film, definitely worth your time. Just don't expect a lot of the Anne Rice stuff in there, because from what I read and from what I gather, it's really very loosely based off of the film. So, and let's go ahead and get to my number one pick for my favorite vampire movie. From Dusk Till Dawn. This is a Tarantino vampire flick, and it's exactly what that sounds like. Everything that makes Tarantino, over the top violence, uh, good music that wouldn't normally fit, but for some reason fits really well in with the movie. Lots of comedy, lots of blood. This is everything that makes Tarantino. So yeah, I mean, it's just all around a great film. George Clooney, who usually plays a good guy, is actually for the first time arguably a bad guy in this film. Even though he's like the main character, and Tarantino plays his brother who has some kind of mental problems, and like he knows that there's something wrong. Like George Clooney character knows that there's something wrong with him, but he doesn't really do anything about it. He just kind of tells him, no, don't do stuff like that, but he does anyway. And of course, it has the infamous Salma Hayek dancing scene in it. Cheech Marin plays 3 different roles in this film. He plays a guard. He plays Carlos, who is what George Clooney is going to go. He's going to go meet George Clooney at this bar. And of course, more so infamously, he plays Chet Pussy, the Pussy Man, who is the guy standing outside of the bar trying to draw people into the bar for the vampires. Danny Trejo's in this film, and I'll just flat out say I love Danny Trejo. I think he's a great actor. He doesn't get nearly enough appreciation for what he does. Been in a million different literally a million different movies. He's in this film, and he's actually the only person. They made 3 Dusk Till Dawn films, and he's the only one that's in all 3 films. I will say, for the record, the other 2 are not very good. I watched them just because they had the Dusk Till Dawn, the name attached to them, pretty much. And yeah, let's just say they're not really worth your time. If you want to watch them just to watch them, like the second one isn't terrible. The third one's pretty bad, but the second one's not terrible. But they're just not nearly as much attention was paid to those as was this film. So yeah, and the only thing I can say about it is it's just a the only other thing I can say is to continue on by just saying how great this movie really is. So, if for whatever reason you're a vampire fan and you haven't seen it, you need to watch it. It's 100% worth it, 100% worth your time. So, yeah. And there you have it, folks. We come to the end of this. Please like and subscribe. Hopefully you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. Um, like I said before, I had a shout out at the end of this film, or at the end of the film, at the end of this video. This video is dedicated to my lovely and beautiful wife, Jaleesa. Also, check her channel out, which I'll leave a link in the description. Goes by the name of Cemetery Glamour. If you're lucky enough to have a beautiful goth woman in your life, or just a woman who enjoys alternative stuff, check her channel out. Got a lot of good tips there for you. So yeah, once again, I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe. And on my next episode, I'm going to do my 10 favorite anime. So I'll see you guys. Same nerd time, same nerd channel, and I hope you have a good evening.